In a quiet village nestled between two hills, there lived a young woman named Lian. She was known for her warmth, her kindness, and the way she opened her heart to everyone around her. If someone needed a hand, Lian was there. If someone needed to talk, Lian would listen. Her home became a place people often visited, not always to give, but mostly to take. Over time, the once peaceful stillness of her small cottage became noisy, crowded, and exhausting. Yet Lian smiled. She believed kindness meant always being available, always saying yes, always giving, even when it cost her peace. She let people in at all hours. She answered calls when she was tired, gave her time when she had none left, and offered comfort even when her own soul ached. And though she barely noticed it at first, something inside her had begun to shift. Her laughter no longer came freely. Her silence, once sacred, now felt hollow. She started wondering, was this what love and goodness were supposed to feel like? One morning, Lian stood by the window of her cottage, watching the sun rise behind the hills. The golden light spilled slowly across the valley, but her heart felt dim. She could hear voices in the distance, neighbors already walking toward her home. Even before she had time to sip her tea, she knew her door would knock. It always did. She had become a lighthouse for others, but in guiding them, she had lost her own direction. Her days blurred together, spent solving others' problems, listening to endless stories, holding space for pain that wasn't hers. She wanted to be strong, to be kind. But lately, kindness felt like a weight. She couldn't remember the last time someone asked how she was doing. Not really. The village admired her, but they didn't truly see her. They saw what she gave, and somewhere along the way she had forgotten what it felt like to just be. Without giving, without fixing, without apologizing for needing space. That morning, as the breeze touched her face, she whispered, "I'm tired." That evening, someone knocked on Lian's door once again. It was Mara, a woman from the village, crying about her broken marriage. Lian let her in, brewed tea, and sat silently as Mara wept. But something was different. As Mara spoke, Lian's eyes drifted to the mirror on the wall. She hardly recognized the woman reflected back. Her shoulders were heavy. Her eyes carried stories that weren't hers. A quiet voice inside her said, "You've abandoned yourself." For a moment, she didn't respond to Mara's words. Not out of cruelty, but exhaustion. The kind of fatigue that grows when you're endlessly pouring without being filled. Her hands were warm around the teacup, but her spirit felt cold. That night after Mara left, Lian didn't clean up. She sat in the dark, listening to the hum of silence, and in that stillness she felt it clearly. She wasn't okay. She had built a home for others, but never built a boundary for herself. If this story resonates with you, stay close. Subscribe, and let stories like this find you when you need them most.
The next morning, as Lian wandered through the village to clear her mind, she found herself walking toward the edge of the forest. Few villagers came here. It was too quiet, too far, too forgotten. But Lian needed the silence. As she sat beneath a tall cedar tree, she noticed an old man not far from her, tending to a small fire. He looked like he belonged to the forest, with clothes faded by time and eyes calm, like still water. He glanced at her, nodded gently, and spoke without asking questions. "You're carrying too much," he said. Lian blinked. She hadn't told him anything. Still, his voice was certain, not unkind. "People come to you because your door is always open, but not everyone enters to bless the home. They come to take what they lack." She looked down, ashamed, but he continued, "A door without a lock is not generosity. It's an invitation for the world to move in and leave you empty." His words struck something in her. For the first time, someone had seen behind her smile.
The old man stood slowly and gestured for Lian to follow. They walked in silence through a narrow path, scattered with fallen leaves and sunbeams slipping between branches. After a while, they arrived at a small clearing where a circle of smooth stones surrounded a shallow pond. In the center, a single wooden cup floated gently on the surface. The old man knelt by the water's edge and pointed to the cup. "This is you," he said softly. "Still, giving, always open." Then he picked up a nearby jug and poured water into the pond. The cup held what it could, but soon began to tilt as the water overflowed. "Every visitor, every story, every burden you hold for others, it adds weight." He poured more. The cup dipped, took on water, and slowly began to sink. "And what happens when there is no boundary between you and the world?" he asked. Lian watched as the cup vanished beneath the surface. Her breath caught. "You disappear," he whispered. The old man stood and walked around the pond. He picked up a small stone and dropped it into the water, watching the ripples stretch out. "You see," he said, "boundaries aren't walls. They're the edges of your peace." He reached into the water and retrieved the sunken cup. Gently, he placed it back on the surface. Then slowly, he surrounded it with a circle of pebbles, just enough to hold space around it without trapping it. "This," he said, "is what a boundary looks like. It protects without isolating. It gives without losing." Lian knelt beside him, watching the cup float calmly within the gentle circle. "But people will push," he continued. "Some won't like your silence. Some will guilt you when you say no. That's when you remember saying no isn't cruelty, it's clarity." Lian reached out and touched the water. It was cool, still, balanced. For the first time in a long while, she felt what it was like to hold space for herself without shame. Lian sat still beside the pond long after the old man had left. The forest was quiet, but something inside her had begun to stir. A realization long buried beneath years of people-pleasing and self-neglect. She thought about every time she'd smiled when she wanted to cry. Every time she'd stayed up late to comfort someone while her own heart was breaking. She wasn't angry, just awake. Awake to the truth that boundaries weren't rejection. They were protection. That love didn't mean self-abandonment. It meant self-respect. She picked up one of the small pebbles and held it in her palm. "This is mine," she whispered. "This space, this peace. I get to keep it." For so long she believed that her worth was measured by how much she could give. But now she understood. Giving is beautiful when it flows from fullness, not emptiness. The forest breeze danced around her, and for the first time in what felt like years, Lian exhaled without tension. Not everyone would like the new her, but the right ones would understand. Days passed, and the village still knocked on Lian's door. But something had changed. She no longer answered out of guilt. She didn't abandon herself to soothe others. Sometimes she said no, and stayed silent afterward. Not to punish, but to protect. She planted flowers in her yard and spent quiet afternoons reading under the cedar tree. And when someone came with urgency and chaos, she paused first. She asked herself, "Do I have space for this?" Sometimes the answer was yes. Sometimes it was no. The village noticed. Some pulled away, some questioned her. But the peace in her eyes began to speak louder than the approval of others ever had. Lian had not become cold. She had become clear. And clarity, she learned, is a form of love too. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, she lit a candle by her window
and watched its light dance alone. Then she looked up and whispered a question, not just to herself, but to anyone listening. Who have you been giving your peace away to?